In today's video, we have a lot of NHL trade and free agent rumors to discuss, including the latest on several items with the Vancouver Canucks, including their push to acquire Oliver Ekman-LArsson. We have the latest on Taylor Hall. We also have an update on Henrik Lundqvist's potential new destination. We also have some updates on Montreal being willing to trade their first overall pick. We have all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as we know, we have a lot to talk about today. There's all kinds of rumors going around between trades that could potentially happen, as well as free agent signings. A lot of today's information comes from the latest 31 Thoughts podcast from Elliotte Friedman and Jeff Merrick, where Friedman kind of outlines a lot of the rumblings he's been hearing around the NHL. Now, first up, I want to talk about Taylor Hall, one of the top free agent forwards on the open market here, coming up in a few days. The Calgary Flames are believed to be an interested party. Now, he does go on to talk about the fact that the Flames tried really hard to trade for Hall back earlier around December when he was traded to the Arizona Coyotes. Apparently, the Flames and the Devils had talked a trade that would have sent Taylor Hall and Sami Vatanen over to the Flames in exchange for Noah Hanifin and Sam Bennett. So that would have been an interesting trade for sure. Of course, Vatanen as well as Hall would have been on expiring contracts. I'm sure they would have at least tried to sign Hall longer term, probably Vatanen as well, but either way, another one of those almost trades that certainly interesting to think about how things could have been for sure. But the Flames obviously are not stopping with their pursuit of Taylor Hall. Hanifin's also a name that I've seen out there as well. It's been in the rumor mill from different insiders, so wouldn't be shocking if Calgary pulls off a Taylor Hall signing. They could also look at some other trades, and Hanifin might be a player that's in play there. The Flames do have some uncertainty on the blue line of how things are going to look next year with all of their unrestricted free agents. And of course, you get Giordano doesn't have a lot of time left on his deal as well, so you can't help but wonder if they could have an entirely different looking blue line next year. But we'll see. The Flames are certainly interested here in doing some significant moves to make their team better for next season. Now, of course, Rick Dhaliwal has had a lot of great updates on the Vancouver Canucks here today, including the latest on the Oliver Ekman-LArsson push. Now, obviously, the Coyotes and the Canucks have engaged in some pretty serious trade talk by the sounds of things. Ekman-LArsson has it narrowed down to Vancouver and Boston, which are teams that he would waive his no-trade clause for. And right now, the Canucks are more than interested in acquiring his services, even though he comes with a pretty hefty price tag. Now, the rumor is that they would have to take a contract back to offset the money. Many had believed that it was possibly Brandon Sutter going back, but Brandon Sutter only has 1 year left. I would really hope to think that the Canucks are pushing hard to have Louis Eriksson in. But what Dhaliwal said today was essentially that the Vancouver Canucks have made a very serious offer. It's on the table, and they're waiting to hear back from Arizona as of right now. So it's not quite clear exactly what would all be included. I would think their first round pick next year would certainly be in there. There could also be another mid-round pick sometime in the next year or two, as well as some younger players like either Rathbone or Rafferty would be included. Potentially a guy like Virtanen or Adam Gaudette, and then also at the same time a contract to offset the money, whether it be Eriksson or Sutter or something to that effect. But Vancouver is pushing extremely hard to make this happen. He's not a player that they view as a bad contract by any means. Like, they think it's very fair from what Dhaliwal is saying. So, it's an interesting concept for sure for Vancouver to make this kind of acquisition. Obviously, they've had a lot of success with Swedish players before. Might have an influence as well on re-signing Jacob Markstrom. Obviously, a fellow Swede who I do believe they have a friendship. So, obviously that could impact things on that front as well. So it seems to be one of the few places he's willing to waive to, and Vancouver wants him as bad as he wants to go there. So ideally, it's also being reported that Ekman-LArsson wants things to happen relatively quick so he can kind of plan out the rest of his offseason and know what's going to be happening, where he's going to be playing. So if he can't get a deal done for where he wants to go, then he might just be content to sit and stay with Arizona for at least another season. So we'll see what happens, but the Canucks pushing very hard and seem to be the leading contender for the Ekman-LArsson sweepstakes. Now, other notes as well that Dhaliwal's put out today include the fact that he believes some progress has been made on goaltender Jacob Markstrom's contract. Didn't indicate that anything was imminent or anything like that, but that some progress has been made, which is good. And like I said, I wonder if there could be a linkage there to those two items getting done. We don't have any other updates on Toffoli or Tanev or anything else. I would think right now, considering the magnitude of Ekman-LArsson's contract, they're probably trying to see how that plays out before they really get too much further with a lot of their other contracts. And of course, as we know, Henrik Lundqvist finds himself being an unrestricted free agent really for the first time. He's been bought out by the Rangers. Certainly his future is in question. Nobody really knows for sure if he's going to play, and if so, where he could end up. But Friedman's reporting here that if the Vegas Golden Knights do end up moving on from Marc-Andre Fleury, that they'd be having interest in bringing in Lundqvist as the number 2 goaltender in the organization. At this point, many expect Leonard to be signed, Fleury to be moved or possibly bought out. But as time goes on here, a buyout for Fleury seems to be less likely. But I would think a trade is going to be pretty difficult as well, given the fact that there's so many goalies on the market and what kind of contract he comes with, $7 million for 2 more years at his age. I mean, not going to be an easy deal to do, but apparently they do have interest if they do end up, obviously, with only one of those 2 goalies and not both, which is very likely that Lundqvist could be brought in as the backup. So obviously, Henrik Lundqvist, I'm sure, when he's considering his options, will probably want to play on a team that has a shot at a Stanley Cup, and Vegas would certainly be right up there when it comes to that. They're one of the top teams in the NHL and had another great playoff run this year, and there's no reason to think they wouldn't contend again next season and be in the mix. So could be a landing spot for Hank should he decide to continue playing in the NHL. Now, apparently we also have word from Friedman that there's some potential trade talk going on between the Minnesota Wild and the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, we know the Sharks are not likely signing Aaron Dell, and they want to bring in another goaltender to kind of work with and challenge Martin Jones. Jones's contract's still too long and too much money left to consider a buyout, and trading him would be pretty much impossible with the current goalie market the way it is. So obviously keeping him and bringing in somebody to challenge him was the plan. Now, I thought they might go with a different route, but apparently they're looking at Minnesota Wild goalie Devan Dubnyk, who's into the final year of his deal, and he could probably use a fresh start. Minnesota seems eager to move on from him and get a different goaltender in the mix there as well. They've been linked to a few other goalies, so not surprising to hear Dubnyk's name being mentioned, and that possibly Dubnyk could be going to San Jose. And apparently the Sharks also have interest in forward Ryan Donato, so we could see some sort of a package deal between Minnesota and San Jose for Dubnyk and Donato going to the Sharks. Not quite clear exactly what the return would be. We know what Bill Guerin is looking for. I'm not sure he's going to get it in this trade. Ideally he needs a top 2 center, open to get some additional picks as well to draft these kind of players he's looking for as well, but not clear exactly what the rumored return would be. But apparently the Sharks are interested in both players. And another team that's interested in Ryan Donato is also the Florida Panthers. Of course, the GM there, Bill Zito, has interest in Donato. That's been well documented here recently. And the Panthers are a team who appears that they could also be very, very busy. Of course, we saw a small trade earlier today between the Panthers and Ottawa where they shipped defenseman Josh Brown to the Sens for a 4th-round pick. We saw them trade Mike Matheson to Pittsburgh. They get Patrick Hornqvist in return. So they're certainly trying to shake things up here for sure. Now, of course, with Bill Zito being the new GM, of course, he's kind of linked to some players that he's already familiar with and that he's fond of. So, obviously, Donato is a player that, like I said, we've talked about a couple times that he might be interested in acquiring. And there's also word that he might be interested in bringing in defenseman Ryan Murray from his time in Columbus. So, obviously, they're probably going to need an additional blue liner or 2 with the ones that they've traded out. So there's rumors that he might be looking at Ryan Murray in Columbus, and he's also interested in signing Mark Borieski, who's a free agent from the Ottawa Senators and has been previously linked there before. So they could be some guys he looks to bring in to kind of reshape that blue line. Now, of course, I'm not really sure what kind of return they'd be looking at to Columbus in a Ryan Murray trade if that deal did kind of happen, but obviously the Panthers are a team who's got all kinds of balls in the air, all kinds of rumors out there. They reportedly obviously talked to Evgeny Dadonov as well about potentially returning and getting a new deal. So there's some talks there, so at least there's interest. But it looks like, though, Mike Hoffman hasn't had much talks, and he is definitely indeed heading for free agency. So obviously, I had fully suspected here for some time that they both could leave, or at least one of them. And it looks like Hoffman is the more likely one to go right now, but I guess we'll see. Bill Zito's got lots of things that he's looking at to kind of reshape this team for next year. Now, there's also word that the Colorado Avalanche might be looking to move defenseman Nikita Zadorov. Zadorov's a player who's been mentioned in rumors before, but of course nothing's ever come to be. They're certainly looking for some additional moves. They might be looking to upgrade their goaltending, like almost every NHL team out there. Seems like everybody's involved in the goaltending market. It's being reported that they could have interest in Corey Crawford if he doesn't sign in Chicago. So obviously at this point, we don't know what's going to happen with their existing goaltending tandem, but it wouldn't be completely absurd to think that Grubauer or Francouz could possibly be traded. I would think that at this point, Grubauer would be the more likely one to go. But again, can they find a deal considering how many goaltenders are out there? I mean, the Avalanche are a team that's probably a couple of pieces away from really truly contending. And obviously at this point, like I said, there's a goaltending upgrade as possible, a small shakeup on the blue line. Zadorov is a player who's it was rumored last year to possibly get traded as well and never did. So we could see that possibly, and I wouldn't be shocked as well if the Avalanche do push hard for a guy like Hall or one of the other top free agent forwards to add some more offense into the mix as well. So I do expect Joe Sakic to be, somewhat busy. Maybe not the busiest guy running NHL, but certainly making some moves to improve his hockey team for sure. Now, when it comes to the NHL draft, we have a few draft rumors to talk about today as well, including the Montreal Canadiens. In a recent interview, Marc Bergevin basically confirmed that he would be open to trading his first overall pick, which is number 16 overall. But of course, it would have to bring back an impact player who could be in the top 6 forward group now. Now, with his pick, if he keeps it, he likely could get a top 6 forward, but that player is probably 2 or 3 years away from having an impact on the organization. So obviously trading that pick to get him, from being a team that's on the rise with prospects to being more dominant and more playoff bound today would be something he wants to do, which makes sense. They're certainly deep in prospects, and it's time to take the next step forward. So at some point, you got to move some of your draft currency or your prospects to get players who can have an impact immediately. So obviously, it is possible he could package that pick with one of the other rumored players that could be on the move, like maybe like a Domi or Danault. I mean, they've been the main ones mentioned in trade rumors, and maybe they can find themselves a heck of a deal to bring in a top player. Now, of course, Bergevin kind of also poured cold water on the idea that they could be going after a big player like a Laine via trade, so that doesn't appear to be necessarily something he's working on. But then again, you can't always take everything they say at face value. I mean, Laine could get expensive on his next contract, and that could be a concern for them, obviously. But there's plenty of other players around the NHL who could certainly have an impact with Montreal, and it could be something that we see here maybe as a draft day trade. By no means is it a guarantee that they do. It just means he's open to it. If he can find that right top 6 forward, it's going to add that offensive punch to the team, then he's open to doing it. Like I said, and it doesn't mean that he'd have to package it up, but with the other players mentioned, imagine what you could get when you package those two things together. You could get yourself a pretty excellent player coming back. I mean, ideally, you'd want somebody with term. I can't see them trading that kind of assets going out for a player who's only a short term left on their deal. They have to have some long term security that are going to stick around, or have to be a player who's going into the final year who'd be willing to sign an extension immediately. But Marc Bergevin and the Habs are certainly going to be a team that I expect to continue to be busy with all the picks he has around the draft, especially. He's going to be a busy guy, and do expect Montreal to possibly move that pick for the first time in a long time to get themselves a top-notch player who can have an immediate impact and help to take this team another step forward next year. So that is all your news for today. Let me know your thoughts and everything discussed down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.